So, for example, we took on a number of years ago Ticketmaster,
Oh,
StubHub, and Ticket Network
yeah.
on drip pricing because of these additional fees that they were dripping onto consumers, so that the initial price for a ticket to a sports event, for example, or an entertainment event was actually not attainable because of these additional dripped on fees. We
Yeah.
also took on car rental companies in the same kind of, the same kind of practice. And again, all of the major car rental companies have been subject to inquiries by or in investigations by the Bureau. And again, because what we don't want is a consumer to be falsely led to a fictitious price that's simply unattainable.
Another episode of the Speak Real podcast, sharing one-on-one conversations. We believe that storytelling is the best way to empower youth and give them the platform to find their voices.
Presented by YouthSpeak. Youth experience, youth voice, youth empowered.
Hey everyone, my name is Carson. I'm a youth facilitator and speaker with YouthSpeak, and I'll be your host today of the Speak Real podcast. Thank you to TD for partnering with us on our IG Live and podcast episodes. And today we have Josephine from the Competition Bureau of Canada here. Hi, Josephine, how are you?
I'm fine. Hi, Carson, and thanks for having me on your show, and excited to be part of this program today.
Yes, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. Let's start off with if you could tell us anything about yourself and your role at the Competition Bureau of Canada.
Sure. So I'm a Deputy Commissioner of Competition, and I run the Deceptive Marketing Practices Directorate. This directorate really is responsible for detecting, investigating, and deterring what we refer to as false or misleading representations and deceptive marketing practices under our Competition Act, which is the act that really governs the work we do here at the Competition Bureau.
That's really cool. I was not expecting that answer because you hear Competition Bureau of Canada and you assume like, oh, this is about, compete competitions, like for sure.
Yeah, and it's part of it too, Carson. There's part of that too. And if I elaborate a little bit on like the Bureau itself, the organization, it's an independent law enforcement agency. So we're here really to protect and promote competition for the benefit of Canadian consumers, for the benefit of Canadian businesses. So in addition to the work I do in deceptive marketing, we also are involved in criminal conduct. So investigating criminal conduct like price fixing, bid rigging, mass marketing fraud. These are the kind of things we do on the criminal side. But we also look at things like dominant business conduct that might reduce competition for consumers, right? And we review business mergers as well. So there's a big competition component to what we do. And if I can add a little bit further on that, I can tell you that we even have the competition promotion branch, which promotes and advocates for the benefits of competition through things like market studies and advice to policymakers at all levels of government. Because, Carson, we believe that competition drives lower prices, and increases innovation, and it fuels the economic growth. So we think competition is important in Canada.
For sure. I remember hearing growing up about monopolies and everything tied to that, and I'm assuming that's, what the Competition Bureau of Canada does, right?
Well, that's certainly one segment of what we do. What I do is focusing on deceptive marketing practices.
Okay, cool. I guess that kind of answers the second question, so I'll jump to the third.
Okay.
Um, what are some examples of misleading marketing practices?
Well, I've got several. Some of the things that I'll talk about are things that I'm sure you've heard in the news. But let me start off really simply by saying that it's against the law to advertise or market something in a way that is false or misleading. That's the basic principle. And our position is that false or misleading marketing practices, it harms one, consumers, two, it harms businesses who are engaged in honest business practices, and thirdly, it has a negative impact on the economy. So when I think about some examples of what I do, so my directorate is involved in, for example, false or misleading representations is one thing we're looking at in marketing practices. Another area, unsubstantiated performance claims. A third area, drip pricing. You might have heard about junk fees in the economy. So that's another area of focus for us. Fake urgency cues is another area. Greenwashing, the importance of the environment, greenwashing, and fake reviews. So, and I can talk about each of these different practices if you'd like. I can break them down for you and give you a little bit more details if that could help.
I think a brief explanation on each would be perfect. Yeah, because
Okay.
some of the stuff I have actually never thought of before. So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
really have much to connect it to in my brain.
So let me start first by saying, so at a general level, like I said, the act prohibits anyone from making a false or misleading representation to promote a business or a product. And once we decide that a representation is false or misleading, a court then has to look at what we call the general impression that's conveyed by that representation. So what is the consumer seeing? So the general impression. And as well, the court will look at the literal. We look at things like performance claims, and in a few minutes, I'll talk a little bit more about performance claims, but advertisers cannot make a claim about a product's performance or its effectiveness or its length of life without it being based on what we refer to as adequate and proper testing. And that testing has to be in place before the advertiser makes those representations, not after. So
Right.
so now let's go into the different, types of marketing, and I'll get back into the performance claims as well. But drip pricing, and I talked about that, junk fees, you've heard about that in our marketplace. Often you'll hear the reference to junk fees. And it's a common misleading practice that it occurs when companies offer a low price to attract the consumer to that product, when then after it's been the consumer's anchored to that attractive first price, the company then adds mandatory fees to make it such that that initial price was never attainable. So that price is, what they do is they drip these additional mandatory fees. And this is against our law. And, when you add additional fixed charges and fees, you need to disclose them up front, not after you've anchored the consumer. And I'll give you an example.
I'm thinking of an example right now of something personal.
Yeah. So here's the thing, and I'm not talking about sales tax. So those fees that are imposed by government, that doesn't fall into this. So for example, we took on a number of years ago, Ticketmaster, StubHub, and Ticket Network on drip pricing because of these additional fees that they were dripping onto consumers, so that the initial price for a ticket to a sports event, for example, or an entertainment event was actually not attainable because of these additional dripped on fees.
Yeah.
We also took on car rental companies in the same kind of, practice. And again, all of the major car rental companies have been subject to inquiries or investigations by the Bureau. And again, because what we don't want is a consumer to be falsely led to a fictitious price that's simply unattainable, because as a business that you're going to add all these additional prices are going to be added on. So that's one area of what we're doing. Recently, of course, the Cineplex case was another case that we've been involved in, and this had to do with an online booking fee that was dripped.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I can't talk too much about that case because it is before the courts right now, but it's another example of drip pricing. Let me then turn, if I can, Carson, to the fake urgency cues that I mentioned. And so here, what we're looking at is using false claims to pressure the consumers, to pressure you, the buyer, into buying something. And they basically trick or manipulate you into making a choice that you might not have otherwise made. So, and this, when you hear of urgency cues, you could think of things like, these countdown timers or these pop-ups, these alerts or messages. And so the consumer feels pressure. They've got to buy it. They don't have enough time, right? You're flexing like you get what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, this is actually, again, relating to something that I think was something that I experienced earlier this year. So
Right.
I definitely want to get your opinion on that later.
Yep, absolutely. And so this is another tactic that's used. That's another misleading practice. The other one that's also very important in my office right now is greenwashing. And this is when companies make environmental claims that are false or misleading or that are unsupported by these adequate and proper tests. And this practice, is used by businesses to create that impression that a product or a service or a business as a whole is greener than it actually is. So companies engage in this practice because Canadians want to purchase items that are less harmful for the environment, right? So if something seems to be good for the environment and I need that product, and there's another product that doesn't have those attributes, I'm going to go ahead and purchase it. So it's luring the consumer to these products that are represented as being good for the environment, when in fact they end up not being as good. So that's greenwashing. And a case, for example, that I can mention is the Keurig case, for example. So we took on Keurig for the recyclability of its K-Cup pods. So they were advertising that their K-Cup pods were recyclable in all of Canada. And after our investigation, we found out that no, they were only recyclable in 2 provinces in Canada, Quebec and British Columbia. So as a result we settled with the company, and we were able to come to a resolution with the company. And one of the things they had to do was to remove the labeling that said recyclable in all of Canada, right? So they had to amend their label so that people knew what they were buying. And so that's another example. That's an example of greenwashing. The other marketing practice that's really also at the forefront of what I do is consumer reviews. So these are, when you help both consumers and businesses, we know they can provide a wealth of product information to help people shop, be smarter, and they reward businesses that provide a greater product choice or service. Shoppers, we say, they trust these reviews, and they trust that they're from real customers that actually tried the products. But what we see happening is oftentimes these are fake reviews, and these can damage trust and can seriously erode what I refer to as consumer confidence. And this is a problem for us. So that's another kind of practice that I would say, is also very important in the kind of work that we do.
Yeah, and thank you for breaking that down, because I feel like too, especially the first 2 you mentioned, I feel like that really resonated with me, and something I couldn't quite put my finger on to a situation that occurred. And I'm probably not going to just go into it too deep while we're recording this, but what I will say about it is it's very interesting to hear it from someone working with the Bureau being like, this is not an appropriate practice. And it's validating in a way. So thank you for that. To kind of kick back into the questions I've written down. Advertising often appeals to our desires for belonging, self-esteem, and we want to know what your advice is for assessing the legitimacy and fairness of this type of advertising.
Let me say here that this type of advertising is common marketing strategy, as I see it. However, it becomes problematic when it misleads the consumers. It always goes back to the misleading the consumer, right? So in the beauty world, you might see claims like this cream will do X or this shampoo will do Y, right? And these promises might sound really amazing, but sometimes they're not backed up by these proper tests that I've been referring to, adequate and proper testing. And when I talk about testing, it has to be real tests. It has to be scientific tests. It has to be independent tests, right? Not providing just an illusion of benefits. And the risk is that performance claims typically must be accepted on trust, right? The consumer has no way to verify, to assess whether a claim is true or not, and supported by testing.
Right.
Advertisers, though, the advertiser, on the other hand, usually does have the ability and they have access to the necessary supporting information. So they need to have, as I said to you before, they need to have this testing in place before making those representations. You can't make a representation about a product's performance, like this is going to make your hair grow longer, faster, or this cream is going to, do this to your blemishes, if it's not backed up by these adequate and proper testing that prove that claim to be true, right? And so for me, it's really important that that consumers always keep this in the back of their mind when they're looking at these products and these representations. One thing that, sort of dovetails into this, and that has to do with a practice called influencer marketing. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that at all.
Am I familiar with it? I'm
Okay.
friends with content creators. I do my own content on the side, so I'm familiar.
Okay, so let me give you some tips here. So one way that we know companies might appeal to our desire for belonging and self-esteem is through this practice of influencer marketing, right? Here, let me say that it's important to remember that businesses, influencers, both, must be transparent when advertising on social media through influencer marketing. The act or the law that I supervise in my directorate applies to influencer marketing just as it would to any other traditional forms of advertising. In order for consumers to easily recognize when online content is an advertisement, we say that influencers should clearly disclose that relationship that they have with the business, the product, or the service they're promoting. This is the key. So that you have to make sure that consumers have all the information they need, right? And one of the information they need to know is there a material connection between the influencer and the product? So influencers should also be honest and base any reviews on and testimonials on actual use. You shouldn't be promoting a product, if you haven't actually used it. So, we expect these testimonials to be truthful, genuine, authentic. We always say that. And businesses are responsible, just as the influencer, when they post advertisements on social media, so both of them can be liable under our act if they don't make those disclosures. So I think it's really important that people understand influencer marketing can be a great tool. But if you're receiving, like if you're an influencer and receiving money or commission, even free products or services, discounts, free trips or tickets to events, or have a business or family connection with the brand, you need to disclose that. That's really, really key under our law. And in fact, I can tell you, Carson, that in December of 2019, the Bureau launched a letter campaign where it basically wanted to, again, raise the awareness of influencer marketing practices in various industries. And we were looking at the health and beauty, fashion, technology, and travel industries. And again, we wanted to make sure that, influencers were aware of their obligations to disclose those material connections, those relationships, and that brands who work with influencers should ensure that this is done properly. And marketing agencies should also ensure that the content created by influencers they deal with are done adequately. So, my motto here in Deceptive Marketing is ensuring truth in advertising. That's my key. Ensuring truth in advertising, because I want Canadians to have all the information they need to make informed purchasing decisions when they're considering a product, a service, an interest. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought on influencer marketing.
Yeah, it does. And it kind of, again, validates me in a way that I've been doing everything the best I can, because recently I've been doing markets, trying to do sticker sales, and I also did like a pay what you can with YouthSpeak. So I made sure to clarify, like, I do work for this company.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is it. Just put it out there. It will alleviate any concerns, right? So make sure that consumers recognize when your online content is an advertisement, when there is a connection. If there's a connection, let the consumer know. And if you are promoting a product, make sure you use it. Make sure you actually used it. Give that genuine, trustworthy advice, because again, it can be a very helpful tool for a consumer to have. But it's got to be honest. It's got to be backed up, right?
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And this kind of slowly leads into the next question we have is, why types of scams may be marketed towards youth and how can they avoid them? I think especially with the influencer marketing, that those are specifically targeted to youth, but what other scams might be targeted towards youth? How can they avoid them?
So on all of the marketing practices I talked about, obviously can target youth, but there's obviously other types as well. So for example, subscription traps could be one. Employment scams. So employment scams, subscription traps, non-delivery scams. Those subscription traps is, again, you're sort of lured, you're on a site, then you're lured on a subscription, free subscription. Next thing you know, you're locked into this subscription that you can't get yourself out of, right? And so what the advice we give to youth and consumers generally, as I say, take five. That expression, take five. Wait, even just 5 minutes to stop and think before entering your credit card information, right? And then I say, be skeptical. Question statements and slogans that seem, quote unquote, too good to be true. And thirdly, I'll say research. Do online research for a company or a product with the words complaint and scam. You never know what you're going to find, right? It'll help you potentially identify some issues. So do some comparison shopping if the product is available elsewhere. Those are some of the things I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I'll just add here, Carson, is the advancement of technology, right? So that's moving at record speed, right? So AI generated deceptive marketing is also growing for us. And the problem continues to increase. And we see this. AI can be used to quickly produce texts or emails or messages in the style and language of a specific person. It can be used to even clone someone's voice. And in just minutes, it can be used to make fake images, audio, or videos of real people. Yes, even you and me.
Yep.
And it can, and what the dangers here is it can be used to impersonate a well-known company or a personality or a public figure to promote a fake product or a service, imagine. And people actually believe they're trusting in that personality, that public figure. Or they could be also used to generate a convincing fake investment opportunity, or they can be used to make chatbots that spread, fake reviews that sound, again, that really look like real people when in fact they're not. So AI is also causing quite a bit of disruption for us.
Yeah, generative AI is something we've been talking about within our team as well. And myself and another one of our team members is working with Ophia on a project for that. So it is very like a lot of people don't really know that AI has been around a lot longer than people think. It's the AI that we're seeing today more so is generative AI, and how that has a lot of implications, especially for artists, content creators, celebrities, just people who decide to put themselves out publicly for their own creation. Things can get freebooted, things can get stolen, your likeness can be used without your permission, and it's scary. It is really scary.
It is scary. Deep fakes is something we look at. So it's part of, again, the practices that we look at in terms of impersonation. And when you have someone like a public figure that you respect and that you admire and you follow, and if they're promoting something, a fake product, you could fall victim to that, and you fall into the fact that maybe this is a legitimate endorsement, and it is problematic. So what we say, again, trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right. If something seems fishy, check names and logos on websites for authenticity to see is there something different. Stay informed about AI and frauds. I say research, read, discuss with family, friends, colleagues. Be informed. It's really about information.
Definitely discuss with people, because I won't say too much about it again for people's privacy, but I was speaking with one of our team members about the situation that I was kind of hinting at throughout this podcast, and their partner was going to use the service. And I said, okay, well, this is what you need to be careful of, because this is what happened to me. And they were shocked. They had no idea. Most people don't have any idea, because, it's very easy to kind of hide those things sometimes. And maybe they are editing reviews, or you never know. You never know. So you got to again, trust your intuition on these things, because I didn't listen to mine in that moment, and I regret that.
But that's great that you shared your experience, because I also know that some people, when they fall victims to scams, they feel a bit embarrassed by it. So they don't want other people to know, so they don't share it. And so someone else becomes victimized as a result. So it's really important to be courageous and to share your experience with others, because then you prevent it from happening to someone else. And so that's, I think, really, really important to say there.
Yeah, it helps that I'm too open of a book in a way. It kind of lends to this job. But yeah, definitely when it's important to speak out about these things that they're happening to you, please tell somebody, especially if you are a youth, it can be hard to go through these experiences by yourself. And you're not alone in this. Like I've been scammed so much in my adulthood, in my childhood. It's ridiculous. It's out there, and youth and the elderly in particular are
Yes.
huge, like are like big chunks of the demographic that are particularly victimized because of vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. You couldn't have said it better, Carson, for sure. Youth and seniors are the two of the most identified vulnerable groups. And when we launch every year, we launch a fraud prevention month campaign. And we often say, remember the 3 R's: recognize, reject, and report, right? And on the reporting side, we know that only 5% of Canadians actually report frauds. And again, it goes back to what I said, because they feel embarrassed, or the amount of, even sometimes the amount of money they might have lost was not significant. So they say, oh, well, it was a small amount. No, we need to share that, because if you report it to law enforcers, then we can do our job, and we can continue to take a closer look, dig deeper, and see what we can do to prevent. I always like to say knowledge is power. I always say that
Yeah.
knowledge is power. And the Bureau, I think, does a really good job in terms of giving consumers information that they need to make these informed decisions on purchasing products, or they're, in reviewing these kind of practices. And just on that, I mean, if you look at our website, we often will release what's called consumers and business alerts. So on issues that are prevalent in the environment, if there's things happening on Valentine's Day, for example, romance scams. Well, we'll start issuing alerts on romance scams, to be careful, to watch for those things, right?
Yeah.
Black Friday, these things again, Cyber Monday, all of these key events in our calendar where people might fall victim to frauds and scams. And we try to issue alerts on artificial intelligence. We issued alerts again, sort of again identifying the things that people should be aware of in terms of impersonations. And so, keep a close look at our website, because we put out a lot of good information. We also have the Competition Bureau YouTube channel, where we put forward, informative videos on different types of deceptive marketing practices and scams and other competition related content.
Yeah.
And we also publish what's called the Deceptive Marketing Practices Digest. Which is, again, it's a very good publication, has articles and features opinions, and offers perspectives on key advertising and marketing issues that, Canadians and consumers and businesses should be aware of.
That's really good to know. And kind of relating back to the knowledge is power thing, I think another reason why Canadians might not report is because they don't know how to report. So can you explain to us how Canadians can report suspicious or unfair marketing?
Absolutely. So Canadians who have information about potential deceptive marketing practices can report to the Competition Bureau online. We have a complaint form. The form can be found on our website. And when you look up Competition Bureau complaint form online, fill in the information, send it our way. A good 70%, just to give you context, Carson, 70% of all the complaints the Competition Bureau receives relates to my line of business, relates to deceptive marketing practices. So keep reporting. We want to hear from you. We're here to protect. We're here to help.
We'll have that linked in the description. But to kind of end off our talk today, where can our audience learn more?
So again, I think keep a close eye out for the Competition Bureau's website. Like I said, there's some really key links there that can help you get additional information. I talked about the consumer and the business alerts. These are like periodic alerts. Social media, we're very good at, we've got some really talented social media experts here, and they will generate messages at key moments in the year. Like I said, where we think there might be some potential for scams like Cyber Monday, Black Fridays. I talked about the romance scams. And so again, there's different social media posts. Watch for those. We also have, as I said, the YouTube channel is very helpful. We have the alerts, and we also, again, just periodically you will see messages coming from the Bureau. And so be part of our social media, channels. And I'm sure you'll be well armed to be one of our superheroes to prevent falling prey to scams in Canada.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for providing us with all this information. Everything will be linked in the description for you guys, so you can go check it out. I want to thank you so much, Josephine, for speaking with us today. I personally learned a lot, and I'm definitely going to look into making a report for my situation because, like you said, knowledge is power, and when we do something and we say something, things can actually make a change. And you're doing such good work with that, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of your platform today. And I'm so again, I was very touched for the invitation, and I hope you and your listeners and viewers will have learned something. And please do reach out. Please reach out. We're here to help.
With that said, that's it for this podcast episode. Make sure to like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And of course, thank you to TD for partnering with us on our IG Live and podcast episodes. We will see you all with another episode very soon. Bye.
Bye, Carson. Bye. Bye, everybody.
If you want to hear more stories, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like. To support more youth by youth led projects, visit us at youthspeak.ca, where you can donate and spread youth mental health awareness.
YouthSpeak charity. Speak, inspire, change.